Hello, and thank you for joining me. I'm Spudman2, and I'm one of the developers on the Kokoro Connect project for translating the visual novel. Today I'm going to be giving you a little bit of commentary into the game as I go through and give you some of the gameplay. So let's go ahead and fire it up here. So fun thing about this already, I've spent way too much time programming certain things. Obviously we translate all the CESA warnings and everything here. But if you actually notice, we translate it such that the game's ISO will actually show up as Kokoro Connect future predictions or random predictions. There's been a little bit of back and forth on the name still. It's supposed to be future predictions. There were some issues during translation and stuff. But yeah, you'll actually see that in the title bar of the emulator if you're playing it in your game. So it's it's kind of interesting how this all turns out. I'm just gonna set this to auto while I go ahead and talk. So there was some interesting things during the development of the patch and everything so far. The first of which is as you saw, there was the prologue. During the prologue, there was the little title screen that pops up and shows Taichi's name and everything, or shows Taichi's image, and prologue, just all of that. There's some actually programming issues right now going on with that myself and Kayla and the other people working on this are trying to solve. But in short, currently the game is using the Japanese versions of each title. So like instead of saying prologue in English, currently it says prologue in Japanese. The reason for this is kind of funny, which is that the game links up files in this very weird and esoteric way that we're still figuring out as we're going from a beta to full release. And one of the things that we found was that we could put in the English titles. So if you go to the backlog, go to certain menus, you'll see the word prologue in English characters rather than in Japanese characters. The problem with doing this is that we actually lose the chapter splash screen that shows like prologue with Taichi's image. So we had to scrap that feature for the beta, but it's it's borderline almost 100% completed within the programming. Another thing I wanted to call out, just because I saw it happen right there, and something we're aware of with the visual novel. So the Japanese voice lines are all pre-recorded and set, ironically enough, to each text box. So like, in this text box, you see a very set amount of characters. And then in the next text box, there will be the continued sentence and everything. If you notice, the voice lines sound weird because they line up to the first text box, but then stop during the second. This is actually a weird after effect of how the game was programmed. You see, every individual voice line in the game, I've actually looked this up once in the files, every individual voice line, every like 1 second, 2 second blurb, even sound effects, like little sound effects that are even like not even a second, like maybe a couple of milliseconds, is encoded as a different file. So, in the Japanese version of the game, every one of these text boxes correlates directly 1-to-1 with a Japanese line, or a Japanese voiced line. We discussed at one point trying to fix it when we would go into English, because obviously the number of English boxes and Japanese boxes is going to be different. And the short answer was it would almost be easier to commission an English dub for the game than it would be to try to recycle the Japanese dub and get it to line up to all the English text boxes. So it's an issue we're aware of, but there's not really a solution, and that's just because of the way the game's programmed. If we could find a clean solution to it, right there. So that's one of my favorite things in there. So if you watch very closely, and then I fairly certain it gets it picked up in the recording, you see for a minute it flashes like a white screen, and there's like a little bit of an artifacted line there. I've long noticed that with the emulator, and we actually logged this as a bug once or twice. But funnily enough, it's not something from the English patch. That's actually a bug in the game's coding. Yeah, we tried to fix it a couple times, but there's no actual way to fix that without fixing the game's code. And, you know, Kayla and I are already doing a lot of fixing the game's code as we're doing through things. But needless to say, the engine this game was built in isn't the cleanest thing. And there's a lot of times where we hit engine limitations, where it's like, oh, we can't fix that, or oh, this is something we'd like to fix, but we need to break the engine's kneecaps and then put in replacement ones to get it to work. Yeah, it's a yeah, there's a number of odd little problems. It's interesting as we're going through the different lines, and I'm seeing the different characters pop on screen. So Fujishima, funnily enough, there's a chapter somewhere in the game that we're still translating it. But I know that one in particular is causing the one translator, Defon752, the real Defon752. If you've ever popped into the Kokoro Connect Discord, there's like 7 of us that are named Defon752, which I'll get to in a moment. That's another long-running joke with the development team. But the real Defon752 was having an issue with that Fujishima thing because there's a chapter title that uses Fujishima's name in it. And, you know, I don't know how much you know about, I will just choose classes over already. I don't know how much you know about Japanese characters and everything. See, there's the chapters screen that I was mentioning earlier. But Fujishima, like, you know, the way it's set up, is only like 1 or 2 characters, or maybe a handful of them at most. Sets back to auto. And there's a chapter title that's like Fujishima's like torture prisoner, or Fujishima's like slave, and yeah, the Japanese for the characters is only like 5 or 6 characters for the entire sentence. And where the game's programmed, we only can use the same amount of characters. We actually can use a little bit more because of double width in Japanese versus single width in English. So we get 12 characters. Even still, Fujishima's name alone almost eats up that 12 characters. So, yeah, we've seen some interesting limitations on names and characters already throughout the game. Oh, this is the first little movie thing that we get there. Yeah, interesting thing with the movies. We once looked at trying to. Well, first we looked at see if there was anything worthwhile to like try to change over. Oh, I hate this scene. I'll come back to that one in a moment too. You know, there was you see, this is what I hate right here. I have to say it here. So some of you might have just noticed the lip flaps have decided to magically begin working. I'm sorry, I know I'm branching off into a lot of the conversations, but the lip flaps work here. Why do the lip flaps work here? Well, we have it listed on the issue on the GitHub. But fun fact, any scene, which is most of them, that has a main character with their back to the screen, like you're playing as that character, does not have working lip flaps right now. And the reason why is because of these scenes, which the lip flaps work properly on, are fundamentally programmed slightly differently than those scenes. So we've gotten them working for these scenes, but we haven't quite figured out getting them work in the other scenes. We have it pretty close to figured out at this point with lip flaps. Yeah, so we figured out that it deals with name tags and everything else, and we could get them to work. Like, we could actually get the lip flaps to work for a single line. After which, it would crash the game. And by crash the game, I mean crash the game, crash your emulator, or if you're using a PSP, crash your PSP and make it turn off. So yeah, that's bad. So we disabled that right now. We disabled the the lip flaps for those scenes. We're currently working on fixing that. That's another thing we're targeting for a full release of the game. We plan to fix, but something that's just we don't have the within our own technical abilities. Let's ask Ian about it. Take a look at the homework. Yeah, it's something that's in our list of things we want to do, but we just haven't gotten around to yet. There's a lot of programming that we've already done with this game to get it to work, and it may sound like there's I'm realizing as I'm talking, it sounds like there's a lot to do still, but the issues I've listed almost already are kind of it for the most part. Most of the game's programming things have been fixed. Once we can figure out a couple of those things, which we feel like we're close with, feel like is an important note. Once we figure those things out, we plan on sitting down and addressing the performance of the patcher and a couple of other issues that we've known people mentioned. But yeah, so I mentioned earlier about if you join the Kokoro Connect Discord, you might actually notice a interesting thing wherein everyone on the Kokoro Connect project for the most part has the name Defon752. This actually originates from a joke that happened during the development. You see, while we were programming the game, obviously different people were helping out. And if you look closely somewhere in our commit history on GitHub, there's this commit where I think it was Defon752 was attempting to update the README, but it registered him as two different people, which was very, very entertaining because he was confused. He's like, wait, how is there two of me? I only have one GitHub account. Which then got into a funnier joke where he was like, did someone steal my identity? So then as a joke, we started changing our names to Defon752. Our response, because our response was, oh, well, we're all Defon752 here. It's made it interesting because whenever we're talking to each other in our chats in the Kokoro Connect Discord, which you should join if you're not a part of, and if you are enjoying the feedback or the discussion I'm giving you, you can go ahead and jump in there and ping us and tell us that, or give us any feedback really for technical stuff, or just whether you think the translation's garbage and we're all terrible at our jobs, we should all quit. We should just shut down the project. Feel free to tell us that. Additionally, if you have any actual feedback where it's technical details, if you're having issues with the patcher or anything else, please do reach out to us. I've left some of my own contact information on the GitHub. You can join us in the Discord and mention in the Kokoro Connect discussions, and we'll respond back to you. We try to check them pretty frequently. But aside from those things, there's some amusing moments within this game. I mentioned earlier about the sound effects, and believe it or not, even you see here again, we get a scene with working lip flaps when they weren't working previously. But even that little ding, 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 ding. The dinging of the bells to signal that the homeroom or whatever is ending in Japanese schooling. That was encoded as its own thing, and now almost as its own quote-unquote voice line in the game. It's driven us pretty insane, to say the least, on some of these things. Again, I'd like to reiterate, this game was programmed pretty interestingly, pretty esoterically. I'm sure that a bunch of us could give you some interesting translation notes and programming notes along the way. One of the interesting things that you might be noticing as it's going through this scene is it's flipping between character to character, and you actually see it later on in the demo. So you notice how it pans back and forth, and it seems very seamless. Some of the other visual novels I've worked on professionally before. I worked on. I did some work with the Yotsunaha demo. I did for Soul Press. I used to work for Soul Press once upon a long time. But I did some work on the Yotsunaha demo. I was one of the lead programmers, or I was kind of the lead programmer for Sakura Sakura. I helped out and was one of the programmers who helped out here and there with Newton and the Apple Tree nudity. But interesting enough, so something I've noticed with some of those VNs, and with most VNs, is you would encode, like, as it's panning back and forth in the background, you see how you would encode that as one long image. Like, one just long image that's longer than the screen, or wider than the screen. So, and then it would just, like, do a kind of camera pan back and forth. If you're familiar with how old retro games, like 8-bit and 16-bit games were programmed, very similar thing. It would just, you know, it would have a long image and then just pan between those, like, parts of the different images. That is not how this game was programmed. I was digging through the game's files, like, looking for what things are responsible for what. And I found a very interesting thing, which was, yeah, I found some interesting file formats. I found a lot of interesting file formats in general, but I found some very interesting file formats that were... They looked like they had modeling data in them. And it looked like it had texture data in them. You know, if you're unfamiliar, like, think of, like, 3D modeling. It had, like, models and then the textures that go on the models in there. And I'm like, what? What? It's like, this is a visual novel. What is modeled or textured in this game? Is there a CGI portion of the game that I'm unaware of? It turns out that every background in the game is its own 3D model and texture. So, like, you know, these characters that are popping on screen, Inaba, Iroi, Taichi, are 2D sprites. But the backdrop is a 3D, like, it's a real 3D model in the game's code. You know, it's this 3D, like, almost sphere, or I should say, it's like a halo ring, for lack of better terms, that has a texture applied just to the inside of it. You know, so, it's really amusing. It's got this ring that every backdrop in the game is just this ring modeled texture. You know, nothing else in the game is modeled or textured like that. Just the rings have models and textures. You know, so as an unfortunate side effect of this is there would be zero way ever in the game to really try to, like, extract those textures and try to, like, recolor them or repaint them to have English characters. Fortunately, we haven't seen any backgrounds in the game that we've been working on so far, or anything, like, through the translation, where that would be necessary, where we would actually need to, you know, repaint it in the backdrop and do some image processing. Yes, here we go. We get the scene with Goto. But yeah, so there's some interesting things going on back and forth. I always enjoy this scene in the later scene with Goto and Inaba. But it's yeah, there's some interesting ways this game was programmed, to say the least. Yeah, let's put all kinds of 2D sprites and everything, but yeah, we're gonna do that. I think one of my most interesting and favorite ones, it brought back some horror stories, is yeah, so every character in the game, every, like, 2D sprite has, you know, they have their various outfits and everything, and they have their various different poses. And the poses are, yeah, as they're currently encoded and everything as they are. But, as you might have guessed, every character's eyes are encoded differently, and their mouths, their lip flaps are encoded differently. This brought back some horror memories from there's, I think, a blog post somewhere out in Soul Press's blog about us working on Sakura and having a similar issue. But needless to say, if you wanted to go, like, data archiving and rip through all the game's files, you would find every single pose used in the game, every single outfit, everything, including some very, very interesting, you know, there's actually some that are, like, concept art or, like, placeholder images. Yeah, I imagine they were left in the game because whenever you finish a game, when you finish a product, you try to clean up as much as, like, temporary or placeholder files as you can, but sometimes you delete a placeholder file and that breaks the game. And so you just put it back in. You don't ask questions on why it broke the game, you just put it back in and hope the game doesn't crash anymore. Fortunately, as if you're a fan of the Cutting Room 4, or if you're a fan of like data archiving or pulling apart different games, you can get in there sometimes, like what we can, and see some of the cut content, see some of the concept art, stuff like that. Fortunately, this is one of such cases where you can kind of see some of that stuff, which is really neat. There's definitely some interesting interactions here with the game's code. As you might have noticed, some of the backlog, if you at any point you can go into the game and go view through the backlog, all the different things, right? And you'll notice that the backlog actually does, for the most part, keep all the English that's put on screen into the backlog, so it actually properly does that. That was an adventure and a half to fix, to say the least. She was, I think it's actually in this scene. I mentioned earlier about how it does how it has a 3D model, and I think this scene is one of the first scenes where we do a character swap. And during character swaps, we generally, or in this case in particular, it like rotates the camera through each character, so it's actually one of the few times where you can actually see it covering the 360-degree ring of modeled data. Yeah, there's some interesting notes here. One of the other things I find kind of entertaining with this game's code, let's go with the word entertaining, is so all the files, all the script files, the game is broken into multiple scripts, right? All the script files thus far have been pretty simple. They have a file name somewhere in the code of like st000 underscore cp00100.bin. Whenever you drill through all the things. That may sound like this weird esoteric, like, rattling off of characters and numbers. What it actually means is that st000 is the main sequence of the game, right? That's the game has a number of side stories and events you can go through. st000 is main story. This is main story branching path. Everything's going to touch st000. After that, you get the chapter numbers. So like CP000 is chapter, it's chapter 0, it's the prologue. CP010 blank is chapter 1, etc., etc. Every character in the game actually has their own script files as well. So depending on the decisions you make in the game, sometimes you end up choosing like, alright, I'm going to play as Inaba, I'm going to play as Taichi, I'm going to play as Yui, I'm going to play as Aoki, right? And when you make those choices, it actually jumps into different script files. And when you jump into those different script files, you actually end up in a script file that's named like CP1601 A or B or C or D. So it's the main sequence underscore the chapter you're on and then which character you're on. It's just a funny little thing on how they oriented the scripts in the game. I'm actually trying to remember which characters are coded to be which scripts. I think I want to say that Aoki is A. No. Aoki, I think Aoki is either C or D. I remember Taichi and Inaba are either A or B. I remember those two in particular because for the demo you actually hit a couple of different scripts that had A or B in them. You don't really get to play as Taichi or Yui during the demo. Just the contents of the demo didn't get to their stories. Unfortunately, just not a lot of Yui or Aoki content yet. There will be more obviously when we get to the full release, but not yet. But yeah, it's entertaining that I'm fairly certain the game coded, I want to say Inaba as A, and Taichi is B. I could be backwards on that. But it's just entertaining to see how the game programmed, and it tells us a lot about who the game prioritized, and whenever they were programming it, which characters they programmed which, or more accurately, which programs they wrote, which characters they wrote first, versus which characters they wrote secondly. I mentioned earlier there was a note that I had almost forgotten about. Oh, here we go. This is where we're gonna get to the scene. Yeah, you get your first. This is the first future prediction that goes on. Well, I should say our second future prediction, but this is the first future prediction where we don't personally experience it. Taichi and Inaba don't understand what's going on, but the others are. Here in a few moments, we're actually gonna get to see the full 360 pan. We're starting to see more and more left into the pan. But regarding images, if you noticed, whenever you are playing around with the game, oh, here we go. There's another lip flap scene. Whenever playing around with the game, if you're using the emulator PPSSPP, or just your general images that show up during the XMB, your cross media bar in your PSP, you'll actually notice that there's this nice, pretty, like, blue sky with cloud background, promo image for the game, Kokoro Connect future predictions and everything. We actually re-encoded that image to be in English. Originally it's all in Japanese. We re-encoded it, including the copyrights and everything, into English. The person who's been doing our image working, JJ, I remember he had an absolute nightmare of a time where he had to hand paint almost every pixel in that image to work. Just to give you an idea of how much effort goes into fixing some of these images or to translating some of these English images, it can be it can range from quite easy, where you just need to, like, alright, take a white paintbrush and cover over something and then put in text, to, oh, please make it stop, why do I have to paint every single pixel individually? But yeah, so there's I hope for anyone who does download and is playing through the game and playing through the demo, that they take a moment to appreciate that, and to take a moment to appreciate all the work and effort that probably went into that. I remember many nights where I was actually on a voice call with JJ, who was doing the image editing and image cleaning, and I remember him, like, almost in tears at certain points, just like, yeah, this sucks. I hate all of this. Why'd you ask me to do this? I hate doing this image. I hope his effort doesn't go completely unnoticed. You're starting to see more and more of the panning, where we pan far left, pan far right, pan far left, pan far right. I almost wonder if they wouldn't have been able to accomplish that effect in this game, like a 360 degree like panning, without either using a video or without. You could have done it honestly, but like you still could have accomplished it without having to do a 3D model with a ring. I just still find it entertaining that was the simple. To the programmers who made this game, the simplest solution. Actually, if anyone knows who programmed this game originally in Japanese, A, I'd love to be introduced to them. B, I'd love to question their sanity many times over. This game has some interesting programming. Let's yell at Aoki to catch that moth. I believe in delegating tasks. But yeah, even like to give an idea on some of the images that are like broken up. Currently on screen you can see the auto scene. That just means I'm playing through the scene automatically. I'm not actually manually pressing the circle button every time. That is its own image. As many things in this game are their own images or broken into their own image, and there's some nightmares programming in images and everything with this game. And you may have heard a moment ago I said the circle button, not the cross button or the X button. but the circle button. In Japan, for anyone who's unfamiliar with, playing a Japanese game on a Sony console, the circle button is the confirm button, not the cross button, which is where it is everywhere else in the world. That is actually no longer true as of Sony's PS5. They upset Japan quite a lot by making it such that the circle button was no longer the confirm button. But yeah, so if you go to play, we get our first or second CG here. A nice, cute little Inaba and Taichi scene. But yeah. So if whenever you go to play the game, if you choose to, you might notice that you have to press circle to tab through each line and everything, or to confirm things. That is a byproduct of this game coming out of Japan and being on a Sony console. Yeah. Something I just remembered with the CG image there. It's currently a bug kind of thing that we're working on within the CGs. But yeah, there's a CG gallery, just like many VNs have a CG gallery, in the game. And in the CG gallery, there's the scene names, which we actually don't have translated yet. We're still working on translating all those scenes over. We found where they're at, we just haven't translated them over just because we don't have so much time to translate things. Yeah, there's some other things you can do within that menu that we're still like translating and working out. Interestingly enough, it's I think it's the only area in the game thus far that you could actually reasonably get to in the demo that you might actually hit untranslated content. Yeah, the demo's been out now for I think about a week. Maybe 2, as I'm trying to remember timelines. But no one's mentioned it thus far. A lot of people complained about the patch performance, which again we do plan to address. Fixing the patch performance is a longer issue than you would think. There's some other things that we want to address with the game, fixing the game's coding, and obviously getting the rest of the game translated. But the patch performance is on our radar. But no one's mentioned about the CG gallery scenes being untranslated yet. Even the music. So like there's a in-game jukebox, where you can view just listen to all the music and everything. Every title, all the music tracks are translated in the game. They all work perfectly fine, which reminds me of a thing I'll come back to in a moment. Even those are translated in the jukebox whenever you go to select them. But not the CG scene titles. And it's a very brief little thing that if you weren't looking for it, you wouldn't notice it. But I notice it because I'm a programmer and because I'm going to notice my own flaws. So I mentioned to go about the music. So I noticed a while ago an interesting bug with the game. This is before the beta release and before the demo. But as an engineer, I end up listening to the music in the game a lot, like a lot. Namely the title themes and the opening themes of the things a billion times. I think the worst one with that one being, if you go back and listen to somewhere, I think on Twitter in the annals of history, there's a small little recording of Dodler, another software engineer, visual novel engineer. Whenever he and I were working together on Sakura, there's this little recording of us singing the Sakura theme at around 5 a.m. 4 or 5 a.m. As we were losing our minds trying to figure out why the game wouldn't go into full screen and come out of full screen properly. We eventually figured it out, but there's this denotation to me that if I cannot listen to the game's music, namely the opening themes, I will choose not to. They will haunt me in my nightmares if I listen to them too much. They already do. Consequently, I turned the music off in the game. And then, somewhere along the line, as I was working on the game, shortly before the beta release, I noticed that I went to turn the music in the game back on, and it wasn't working. So I spent the better part of 6 or 7 hours digging at the game, trying to figure out what broke the music. Yeah, I thought maybe the English track titles broke the music. It wasn't that. I tried thinking this, trying that, trying this, trying that, trying this, trying that. And I couldn't find anything. You know, changing track titles, unlocking music, you know, resetting save data, nothing could fix it. And then I started just going through the game's engine code and ripping out chunk after chunk after chunk after chunk and putting it back in with the Japanese original code. And then I found a singular text box. Not like one of the script text boxes, like what Iori is showing right here. No, like one of the pop-up text boxes that says, like, press circle to continue. A singular one of those was off by exactly one or two bits. You know, meaning 1 or 2 zeros or ones. It was off by just a handful of bits. And that caused all the game's music to break. The rest of the game works perfectly fine. But for some reason, that being off by 2 bits caused the entire music in the game to crash. This goes back to what I was mentioning, where the game's kind of esoterically programmed in this really weird manner, where things that should never be tied together are tied together. So, like, you know, pressing circle to continue to confirm that you've completed the game, that missing 2 spaces at the end caused the music in the game to work. You know, things that shouldn't be connected at all are just magically connected. There's definitely been some madness-inducing programming as we've gone through this. Yeah, it's there's some interesting notes with the, as I've mentioned before, like the programming stuff. You know, we get a different music track here. Something else you might have noticed as we're going through the game, you might notice that every line begins and ends with a Japanese quotation mark. The little, like, angle bracket looking thing that ends with another little angle bracket looking thing. Yeah, it's square bracket. Yeah. I mentioned earlier about the lip flaps. Those are mandatory to be there for the lip flaps to work. You know, if those don't exist at the beginning of every line and end every line with that, the game will not try to load any lip flaps. Yeah, we're looking into a way to at least change that into an English quotation mark instead of a Japanese quotation mark. You know, honestly, if that's something that people would, you know, here's where we're getting the 360 pans and everything. If that's something where people actually wouldn't like to see that, please do feel free to let us know. You know, we're open to feedback about translation and how we're doing this. Yeah, another interesting note is, you know, alongside programming the game and doing the engineering, I try to proofread the game as well and, you know, mention little things here or there that I notice. You know, Whale is the actual editor for the game. He does all the actual real editing. Dayfon does all the actual translating. At least currently, we're looking for more translators and more editors. If you'd like to volunteer your help, we'd love it. But I also proofread and, you know, try to QA test the game, which we need more people to do as well. But anyways, while I was proofreading this, you know, I'm not the best at English. It may be my native language, but I'm still awful at it. There was exactly one note that I did point out to Dayfon about the translation. And it's because it's actually one of my favorite scenes in the Kokoro Connect anime and in the book. Is you know, the comment that Iori has coming up here in a moment. You know, she picks on Taichi, and you know, she calls him a selfless freak. And I found it entertaining because, you know, the word selfless and freak has completely different connotations in the English language. You know, the official translation, there's this neat idea where the word selfless generally implies this, good connotation. Someone who's willing to go out of their way to help you. They're thinking of others first, always, which is very much Taichi's personality. But also calling him a freak, which has a bad connotation. Generally, it's something you're doing that's abnormal. It's an entertaining thought to me, and I've always enjoyed it within Kokoro Connect, where Taichi is treated as a selfless freak, because it's the idea of being overly selfless, always putting everyone else first and never thinking about yourself almost becomes its own form of selfishness. Kokoro Connect delves a little bit into that theme. So I remember whenever I hit that line here in the visual novel, I greatly enjoyed it. It's an important note to Taichi's character. But yeah, there's obviously some bugs as we're still going through and programming the game and trying to fix things up. Yeah, I mentioned this as we're kind of winding down the demo. Yeah, here he's talking about being a freak and everything. But there's still a lot of work left to be done in terms of translation, localization. Surprisingly, the images are almost done. Like almost all the images in the game are encoded and redone in English. A significant part of the game's code is there and ready to go in English. We're just figuring out the lit flaps and everything else I've already mentioned. So to anyone who's interested in helping out in the project, we're really in the phase where if you are a translator or an editor, or a proofreader, or a quality assurance tester, we're looking for those parts in particular. Those people who are willing to help out in those ends particularly. We're even just looking for people who are willing to help map out the choices in the game, because the game has this really weird walkthrough and choice mapping system that's kind of esoteric. Again, I keep using that word because it really is that. But yeah, even if you're just someone who has no technical skills, no editing skills, we're still looking for help, and we'd still take any help that people are willing to offer. At the end of the day, the biggest thing that we're looking for is just someone who's willing to help and join in with the project and do what they sincerely want to do. You don't have to have the highest skill set. I actually remember before I started working on this game, I'd never really done ROM hacking too much. But yet here I am talking to you about working on the game's code and everything. As another interesting note, you might actually be curious as to why we cut off the beta of the game where we did. You see, if you've already played the game a little bit, if you've downloaded it, done a little bit, you might notice that actually the parts we've translated goes beyond the part we certified and we mentioned. We certified and mentioned that up until all the club members go home for the first time, that's the part we certified for, right? We only certified up to that part in the game. The reason why is the first side story in the game can launch after that. If you choose the very specific set of options, as I was mentioning about flowchart and mapping and choices, if you choose the very specific, perfectly right choices, you can actually launch yourself down the first side story. It's the sister side story. And there's some issues with getting the game programmed to be editing, being able to go through the ending and everything perfectly. The game won't crash when we go into an ending. But just because of how different things were programmed down there, we didn't translate all the side stories of the game yet. So that's why we actually certified it to the part that we did. If you download the patch right now as it is, you can actually probably play past our certification point a little bit. But we're not, we can't guarantee it's going to work. You see right here, whenever it goes into Chapter 3, this is where we cut off the certification point. Because, you know, here we're going along the main story. But if you ended up on the side story, you could end up going down a completely different path where you actually never see any of these scenes. You know, it takes you into this ending route, and you get a, I think you actually end up in a bad end. If you go down that side route. Yeah. You know, but all this said, you know, something I'm going to show you really quickly here, and is that, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the auto progression here. The game wants to respond. Yeah, you'll actually notice here, all the menus in the game are pretty translated, actually. You see the no data detected, no image, anything. You can organize your save files. Loading is, yeah, all the way there. Quick save and quick load exist. You know, but you'll notice the save file names are in Japanese still currently. You know, all the menus are translated. You'll actually notice that the text along the right for all these menus are translated in English, except for the scene descriptions, like actually where you're at in the save. Yeah, the location, the person, and the chapter title. Again, the chapter titles are giving us problems with programming things. As you also notice here, there's DLC in the game. We actually have the DLC for the game. We at some point would like to translate it and localize it. But we're just not there yet. Because if you go through all the different things, you can see these scene summaries. You can even see the summary of the scene, like Yochi Random, "Am I Angry?" is translated there. But the actual the chapter names themselves aren't translated. You know, which also carries over here, where you can see you see it trying to pop in parts of the chapter title stuff and everything in here. Yeah, but I mentioned the sound test menu. Almost all of these are translated. Yeah, the gallery is translated. It actually might take a few extra seconds. See, it's actually checking because I have the DLC installed into the game. If you look in the top left here, you can actually see the Japanese scene title names and everything that we're still working on getting over into English. Yeah, and as one last little note, you probably saw the data install menu. The only thing that the game data installs, in case anyone was ever curious, you know, it's 188 megabytes, and it's actually just the font for the game. You know, the special font that it's using. That's the only thing it's actually really installing here. Nothing else is installed. Yeah, it's fine as I'm watching the install. You see the backdrop of the game here. Even the main menu was coded as a 3D modeled ring, which it then puts this 2D layer on top of. But enough talking about rings and everything else. That roughly covers all of our game content we have to show you thus far with the beta release and with the demo. I thank everyone who's already downloaded the demo and the beta release and played it. I encourage everyone else who hasn't to give it a try and to let us know their feedback. You know, if you like it, let us know. If you don't like it, that's fine. Also, let us know that. But really, just talk to us about it, because we, as a team, we just like to hear that people are in fact playing the game. Yeah, it's a nice thought for us. So that's it from me. I'm Spudman2, and this has been a nice little gameplay demo with some commentary from me rambling.